Welcome back to In Studio. I'm your host, Seth Rosczewski from WRPS Rockland, and I'm here with Steve O'Donnell, Select Board member. I'm here with Allison, the Town Planner, Dave Taylor, the Sewer Department Head, and Kristel, the Water Superintendent. We're going to have a interesting conversation today about the state of Rockland, and we're just going to dive on in. I want to welcome all of you and say thank you to everybody for joining us today here at the Dave Cable Murphy studio. And as we get going into this, this show's really going to be about the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan. Can someone just explain what that is for the people that might not know about these plans?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in on that. I've done a couple of these in other municipalities. The housing production plan, which is required by the state to allow for us to get certain grants and to reach our subsidized housing inventory safe harbor, is really to allow for residents to set goals and priorities that are in line with the local housing need. The open space and recreation plan, also state required, gets updated used to be 7 years, now it's 10 years. That is also a way for leadership and residents and other people who are stakeholders in the open space and recreation space within Rockland to share their ideas and short and long-term goals for all types of things related to open space in Rockland.
Why is Rockland doing these two plans simultaneously at the same time? They seem to be completing them together. Is there a particular reason for that?
This is actually a pilot that we're working on with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Typically, they are done independent of one another, but we are a short bench town. Up until recently, there was only one person in the planning department, and it's very heavily reliant on feedback from my colleagues, and they're all also very busy. So we merged these two efforts to have them happening concurrently, not only to save some money and time, but also to be able to demonstrate how these two things do not have to be in contrast with one another. They are complementary features of Rockland, and we should be thinking about how we want to incorporate housing production while we protect those resources that residents want to hold on to and value as open space.
And today, I really want to know about the HPP and the OSRP. What are they, and how do they work in tandem? How do they work together? How do they complement each other? Do they work together?
They do. The housing production plan, as I said, helps us create the framework for our short and long-term goals and to make achievable goals for Rockland. I'll give you an example. The 40R district that we are in, it's the Rockland Downtown Revitalization Overlay District. 40R is a term for a state legislation that allows Rockland to capture some funding for the units as they're built. That was one of the short-term goals in the previous housing production plan, and it was met, and we achieved it. We haven't reached any of those goals, of those units, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But that is one example of one of the outcomes of a really healthy and well-thought-out housing production plan. An open space and rec plan, one of the things that was on a previous plan was the McCarthy Farm. Mm-hmm. And that was achieved as a short-term goal through a parkland grant and some Community Preservation Act funding. The town was able to get that through, I think it's Chapter 61A, when I think it was formerly a farm. It was highlighted in the open space and rec plan, and the town acquired it. So it's a great function for people to feel like they have a vested interest in the outcome and to see those goals become tangible.
And why is MAPC the right entity for this work? And what expertise do they bring to Rockland?
The Metropolitan Area Planning Council has been around since I've been, engaged in professional planning, and, long before that. They lend expertise that can be objective, and they make sure that we are capturing all of those voices that should be reflected in the outcome of these types of major planning efforts throughout the town.
And Allison, I just want to know a little bit about why, or what is the methodology behind this action? Can you walk residents through it?
Sure, of course. So we entered into a contract sometime almost a little under a year ago, and then we had a kickoff meeting. And between then and now, what Metropolitan Area Planning Council and I have been doing is I share up a bunch of data that's very, very specific to Rockland. And then they also accumulate a bunch of data through census data and all other kind of research analytical stuff that I don't have access to.
Sure.
And then they have very specialized technical experts on their team that will extrapolate those pieces that are very specific to what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. They will create like a baseline, and then they will have focus groups. They will have one-on-one interviews. We recently just put out a flyer. I think it's on our Facebook page. We have a subcommittee that has been appointed. They are also helping to facilitate conversations in the community. Once all of that is done, MAPC will come up with a draft, and they will work with the subcommittee on that language. We will all have the ability to review it, and then it'll go to the state for approval.
And what are some of the risks that Rockland runs if they don't maintain approved plans?
So you don't qualify for certain grants, similarly to how we were able to use parkland funding to acquire McCarthy Farm. If you don't have an active open space and rec plan, you just simply can't capture those grants. With the housing production plan, you also get eliminated from your ability to maintain your subsidized housing inventory, and those things matter when you're trying to have control over the type of housing production you can maintain in your town. No one likes a 40B project because you lose your control over that parcel and that project, and you're coming from behind the 8 ball rather than having control up front. And so that's why having a housing production plan is critical.
I want to move into land use composition, and maybe Steve, maybe you can join in on this.
Sure.
This little bit of a subject right here. Can you give residents a clear picture of how Rockland's land is currently used and what's restricted, what's residential, and what's available for redevelopment?
So I want to talk about McCarthy Farm, Allyson mentioned a bit ago. That was purchased in part with Community Preservation Act funds. As a result of that, we need to put conservation restrictions in place that prevent any kind of further development. You can put certain language in the conservation restriction to allow certain uses. So some of the things you can do with a Community Preservation Act funding when you purchase land with that funding is put in an active recreation. One of the things that was also in the previous open space plan was expansion of Hearts of Park and the expansion of disc golf in Hearts of Park. And part of the conservation restriction when Community Preservation Act purchased that additional land allowed for the maintenance of the existing disc golf course that existed on private land in agreement with the previous landowner. And so there are different zoning areas within Rockland. Industrial, we have a hotel district, residential, and that dictates what can be built on those areas. We also have a number of conservation restricted parcels throughout the town, and those cannot be developed. And so I think Allyson mentioned before that it's important that we partner and bring these two groups together and do it together, because it's all about land, right? Whether we build on that land and whether we preserve it for open space, for community use in perpetuity. I think it's a good discussion to have. Folks that were appointed to each of these committees have different goals, right? The housing production plan folks want to see affordable housing built. They may have an eye toward development. With the open space and recreation plan, they're really thinking about parkland. They're thinking about preserving our waterways, preserving space for wildlife, and we have park department representatives on this committee too that are thinking about the future of youth sports and how do we continue to accommodate the growth of certain sports in the town.
How does it affect future growth?
So one of the big things that we worry about is the dearth of affordable housing. Really, it's a nationwide crisis, particularly in Massachusetts because of the high cost of living. it's really hard for a first-time home buyer to get into the market. And, the simple laws of supply and demand require that if you want to have more affordable housing, you need to increase inventory. And so to do that, and Allison mentioned this earlier, is that we need to be able to build, right? We need to build homes, we need to build, and sometimes, condo complexes, apartment buildings, and even apartment rents are pretty high right now. And that's all due to inventory. There's just lack of open, available homes for people to move into. This gives the community an opportunity to dictate where certain types of housing should be built, where we did the MBTA multi-use district up by the hotels off of Hingham Street. And that is already zoned for multi-use, exactly what it says. Commercial on the bottom, residential above. But when we think about the other areas of town, sticking a giant apartment building in a single-family neighborhood really would stick out like a sore thumb. So this gives the residents of the town the opportunity to say, we think this would look good here, this would look good there, and drive the decision-making of the town as we go forward with housing production for the next 5 years and open space for the next 10.
So I want to talk a little bit about open space and some of the achievements that open space has gotten. Allison, do you want to talk a little bit about what accomplishments in the last couple recent years that open space has gotten?
Sure. So one of the big ones that we've been talking about is McCarthy Farm. I think that's generally, was it 36 acres?
Yeah, about 36 acres.
Yeah. And so that also backs up to what another land that we're trying to acquire and we're in the process of looking at right now, which is Camp Alice Harlton, which was formerly a campground owned by Whitman. And that Rockland is using some CPA funding, I think?
Yeah, they're going to use CPA funding. It was a old Girl Scout camp that was donated to the town of Whitman. The town of Whitman recently voted to accept that land. Part of, if you're donated land to a town, the town actually has to formally accept it before it becomes part of their owned land. So it kind of sat in limbo for about 50 years. And town of Whitman voted to accept it. There was a proposal on the table at their town meeting to sell it to a private company that would manage soccer fields, I believe. The people in the town of Whitman voted that down, and then a subsequent vote voted to only allow the sale to the town of Rockland, with the stipulation that it be put in a conservation restriction similar to the McCarthy Farm restriction.
How does the open space at the Naval Airspace fit into the Green Necklace vision? What is the Green Necklace vision?
So my understanding, and I don't want to make statements about Donald Cahn's vision because I actually think it's fantastic too, but Olmsted was one of the early kind of open space planners of, I don't know, Boston or pretty much anywhere actually. But if you think about Boston, in theory, there is his idea was to have this greenery that embraced the downtown and allowed for connections to open space. And the idea is to have that similar appeal here in Rockland. And I think generally the idea of having this large green buffer between what I'm just going to call Rockland proper, because I don't really understand another name for it right now, and the base, because although part of the base is in Rockland, it is distinctly different in the sense that it's just kind of like this unused land that has a natural buffer between Rockland and the developable portion of that base. I think the Rocklands area within the base is something like 460 acres. I'm not entirely certain. There are only 82 developable acres of land within the base and Rockland. And so that green area, or the idea of a green necklace, also folds into those goals of the Open Space Committee.
And what are some of the priority or primary areas for improvement?
Do you think in the base or just generally in Rockland?
Generally in Rockland.
So right now, one of the goals that primary focus has been on the Pleasant Street landfill.
Mm-hmm.
We just went we're working on a contract with an engineering company who will be filling that former dump, I guess, for lack of a better word, and putting a post-closure use that will tie into, I hope, tie into the open space and rec plan, and also will be generating a tipping fee that will go back to Rockland for some kind of future open space use. Do you have anything more on that?
Yeah, so I mean, the idea there is that we have essentially an old landfill that is uncapped. If you were to walk up there, you would see some old junk sticking out of the ground. By law, we're required to cap that. So essentially putting dirt on it, a non-permeable surface, like a specialized rubber, and then you put additional fill over the top of that, clean fill over the top of that. The idea is that they're going to bring in essentially used construction fill, nothing toxic or hazardous. There'll be multiple checks along the way as we bring that in, and they're going to pay the town essentially to take that fill. Using some of that revenue, they're going to cap and then purchase clean fill to put on top and seed it. It'll be a revenue generator for the town. We're looking at millions of dollars going into the town that we can use either to further develop that property, develop other open space, I believe is the current idea behind it, although the select board will vote on how we utilize those funds going forward. But really for general capital use projects.
What about the rail trail, Hearts of Park, Reed's Ponds? Any improvement or maintenance needed over there?
There is. So we did a number of years ago, the Community Preservation Act funded a master use plan for Hearts of Park and worked with, I don't think it was MAPC, but it was a company like MAPC, a consulting company that surveyed the community to see where the priorities were, what they wanted to see in town for use. And what it identified when you're working with Gene Blaney from the rec department is that the pump system we use to clean the pond for swimming was is something that we severely needed. The bathhouse, I think, was built in the 1950s and is severely depreciated. And looking at opportunities to create maybe an open air pavilion, redo the bathhouse, improve the parking lot over there. And part of that we mentioned before, purchasing additional land to make Hearts of bigger. We mentioned Reed's Pond. There was another initiative, Spring Lake Cemetery. Reed's Pond is also known as Spring Lake. We have the beach, right? The beach area. It's been there for as long as I've been in Rockland. I've been in Rockland for a long time. But that was a lease, essentially a lease that was given to the town from the cemetery. We worked with the cemetery trust to acquire it eventually through eminent domain due to some paperwork issues. But essentially now the town of Rockland owns that beachfront where we hadn't before. And there is goals from, I know, the Community Preservation Act, Open Space, and Park Department to continue to better that land and bring it back to its former glory. There used to be, I don't know if we'll be able to get there, but there used to be a swimming hole over there, a fountain, that kind of thing. So to continue to beautify that part of the town, which I think is an asset, and look to maybe provide some programs over there.
I want to shift over to housing for just a moment. And what prior housing production plans identify as Rockland's most pressing housing needs?
So I think previous housing production plans have indicated that there's a need for elderly affordable housing and just generally affordable housing. Actually, to be fair, it's a supply and demand market, as Steve already indicated, right? So all housing that adds to your inventory by default becomes some level of including affordability, even if it just means that you're bringing down your mean, right? So, housing production in general will help offset at some point, I would hope, where we are with the market. In Rockland alone, I think there's data that shows in the last 5 years the median house value has gone up 48%, but our salaries have not gone up 48%. And so that affordability problem becomes more and more increased and creates attention, every time those values go up, without people bringing in the same, commensurate amount of salary. The gap between who can own a home and who can't continues to grow. It's very challenging. Our hope in creating a new housing production plan will also, create and identify short and long-term goals that are in line with that real growing need here in Rockland.
How does Rockland fit into the broader regional housing crisis?
It's not, like you just indicated, it is not unique to Rockland. It's everywhere. It's not just in the Northeast. It's, countrywide, probably globally wide. There has been no big amount of housing production since like post-World War II, when we had suburbans, the rise of suburban America. You had a push in like the mid 80s when the economy was great, where the McMansions came up from everywhere. But we have had no real housing production in a very long time. And so as people age and want to grow and move out of their home, right now they're faced with unsurmountable student debt, and they're choosing to have a family or buy a house. And those are real outcomes of lack of housing production for people all over the place.
And what does the data show about local housing costs and affordability pressures?
The data shows that we've made some strides in reaching our subsidized housing inventory goal. We're just shy of the 10%, but the economy is shifting and the cost of construction is rising. So, even those properties that are currently permitted, we might not actually see them in production soon. We've already had a few people come in and ask for extensions on their permits. And that's it's kind of like it's a moving target, I guess is the best way to think about it. We'd like to see new types of zoning mechanisms. We have the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. We're tweaking ours because ours was passed last year and there were changes in the legislation that now require us to go back and modify our own bylaw. But even with that, we still have limited water and sewer to connect to. And we've all been trying to collaborate on how to handle that, but it is, again, a moving target, and we're just trying to get from point A to point B.
And what types of housing would best meet the needs of current and future residents?
I think, I don't want to make statements about how other people live, but observably, the type of zoning that I've seen recently indicates that people are looking for smaller homes. They're not looking to have some big 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath house. I think the reality of the situation is that we know we don't have a lot of land, and we also know that we don't have a level of income that folks can drop, $1.5 million on a big house anymore. So I think as we're looking forward to how we codify our next housing production plan, we need to be mindful of our limitations in Rockland, that we really are a space of redevelopment, and think about who is going to be able to own them. Do we want the long-time Rockland residents, multi-generational families, be able to afford to put an accessory dwelling unit in the yard, or do we want to potentially look for those big older parcels where we can, allow for some single families to be built on, reducing the minimum lot size.
Let's move into financial impacts and infrastructure. And how does the new housing or commercial development affect the town's finances?
Well, I think anyone who's been paying attention recently understands that, again, not unique to Rockland, but all municipalities are facing some financial hardships right now. And there's really no planning you can do to get out of those. It happened, right? We had lots of things happen that were beyond our control. Insurance costs are going up. No one's wages are really increasing. it's a difficult time. The cost of utilities is going up. We have a lot of climate-related emergencies that require maintenance. And so if we don't grow out our tax base, the same pool of people who live here have to absorb that debt in some way, right? And so if we find a way to increase our infrastructure to allow additional capacity, that will then trigger the opportunity for new growth, we're alleviating some of that pressure that everyone is experiencing right now.
You mentioned the taxes. And what should residents understand about the tax burden on existing households and the role of user fees?
Things like infrastructure. You have water and sewer, and trash for that matter, where they operate on their own enterprise funds. And so it's separate from the property tax. So homeowners pay a property tax, commercial building owners pay property tax. Those go toward things like schools, fire, police, town administration. And as Allison mentioned, so one of the things that we have Dave Taylor here, who's the interim sewer superintendent, as well as the highway superintendent. We just had a large snowstorm, and that is looking to put the town in over $1 million deficit that we're going to have to pay for at special town meeting. All of that comes out of our property taxes. Now, Massachusetts, if you listen to our select board meeting where we had Representative DeCoste and Senator Keenan in, one of the big barriers, I believe, is that Massachusetts doesn't allow for a progressive taxation anywhere, whether it's excise tax, whether it's property tax, whether it's income tax. We all pay the same tax rate on all of those things. And what it creates is essentially a regressive tax system, where if you have a lower salary, you're essentially paying a higher percentage of your net worth than someone with a higher salary. And so Rockland's a blue-collar town. The majority of people in Rockland, based on statistics, qualify for affordable housing. It's something, I don't have the numbers recently, but I know I talked about it during my campaign. A family of four would qualify for affordable housing somewhere around $100,000 a year income, which I think shocks a lot of people. When they think about affordable housing, that's not something that comes to mind. And so we're talking about development, adding additional inventory. It's going to do a couple of things. There'll be more properties, more developed properties means that it has a higher assessed value, which means they'll be taxed at a higher rate. Open space is taxed at a much lower value because there's no improvements to the land. We spread out that tax burden by increasing the developed properties in town, which will limit tax growth, how much we have to charge to fund these things. There have been studies done, and if you go to the Southfield Redevelopment Authority website, there's a great write-up that projects tax revenue toward the town. And what I found interesting was how much, a commercial building or a residence requires for, additional costs related to education, additional costs related to fire and police. It's not as much as we're getting for tax revenue. So it helps balance those books. It prevents the rate of tax rise that we continue to see year over year, and it hopefully in time offers some relief to the taxpayers.
And how do infrastructure limitations like water, sewer, general maintenance affect Rockland's ability to implement these plans?
So I think that's probably best answered by Kristel and Dave. They are much more knowledgeable about the state of our current infrastructure. But the fact of the matter is we have limited water available, and we currently are in a sewer moratorium, although we're working toward increased capacity. But I'd like to turn it over to them to get their thoughts.
So we are, for the water department, we are bound by a permit with the state. It's a Water Management Act permit, and that basically dictates how much water we can pull or treat out of the reservoir. So if that permit is, if we're running close to that, that draw, we can't continue to encourage development responsibly. So I think that's where we're kind of between a rock and a hard place right now with wanting to promote responsible growth, but being in the situation where the supply is actually pretty limited at this moment right now. And I think the same thing with sewer. I won't speak for you, but I know they're with the moratorium. They're in somewhat of a similar situation.
Dave, do you want to add anything?
So just like Kristel alluded to, so obviously we're under some restrictions as well. So we run under a NIPD's permit, the wastewater treatment plant, and that falls under the EPA. And then we have what we can process is up to 2.5 million gallons a day. So we experience I&I issues, inflow and infiltration. So we're trying to get that corrected. By doing that, inflow, I'll explain inflow and infiltration. So inflow is a direct cause from, say, if somebody's tying in drainage or they have illicit sump pumps or anything coming off of roof drains coming into, directly goes right into sewer. So that can be 100%, you can get that back, the credits of that back if you rehab it. Infiltration is a little different. That would be out into like underground infrastructure, would be wherever we might have a sewer manhole. That could be like a broken seal or wherever a pipe's coming through at that point. That could be leaking. It could also be pipe sequencing in between the gaps of the pipe that will allow infiltration. So when we get high flows at the plant that exceed that 2.5 million gallons, because of a large amount of rain, or like what we're experiencing right now, we're dealing with snow melting, but it's excessive right now because it's all at once. It's not like even in what Kristel would like to see. She would like to see that melting over a longer period, and we're getting it all at once, plus the rain. So we're experiencing high flows right now at the plant. That also compromising our processing at the plant, and also the processing equipment. So that's a heavy burden at the plant on the underground infrastructure, and we have to pay for that. So obviously we don't have that extra money coming in without what everyone's talking about right now with the development. So, and that becomes a burden to your taxpayer, your resident.
And what Dave's kind of referring to a little bit is that's extra water that shouldn't be going to the sewer treatment plant. It could be going to other places in the environment that it should be going to, rather than burdening the sewer treatment plant where it doesn't belong. So by tightening up the I&I and the drainage and things like that, that will reduce, correct me if I'm wrong, what shouldn't be going to the sewer treatment plant and redirecting it to places like my reservoir where it should be going. Sure. Things like that, groundwater sources. It all, we kind of need to work together to get this done and, have it go the right place.
Yeah, and it's an easily show. We experienced a couple droughts since I've been here. The most, I think, what was the most recent? Maybe 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
And we were taking in at that point 1.5 million gallons a day. Without that excessive amount of rain or any inflow and infiltration. So that gave us a baseline to see where our actualities were. It even fell underneath that at one point. So as soon as we get, an excess amount of snow melt or rain, it's self-explanatory at that point. We're experiencing inflow and infiltration. So, and obviously that's an issue when you're going over, again, like what I said, it becomes a processing issue. You have to hold it at the plant. Just for example, we're running at 5.5 million gallons right now, and what we're doing is we're holding it at the plant, and then we're sporadically adding it into our system to process. So, once you go over to a higher level of that, then you have SSOs, and thankfully we have a very good staff at the plant right now, and they're able to process that by getting more capacity at the plant. Dealing with maintenance issues and holding it at the plant. And like I said, sporadically, intermittently, adding into the processing. So it's expensive. And then you're paying for chemical enhancement before it actually goes out into the waters. That literally enters French's Stream once it's processed and it's cleaned. So that is a burden by doing that. And what we've done is we've had the moratoriums came about, or from administrative orders. The first one was back in 2006. The second one was in 2020. And then what that does is what the town did, or the administration did at the plant, is they ended up having a moratorium. That was the first phase. The second phase was trying to rehab I&I. So the first time I came down there as interim was back in 2020, and then we started doing a little bit more I&I rehab. Back in 2022, we actually signed an I&I control plan, which is actually part of the administrative order, in Weston and Sampson Engineering, which Kristel knows. She uses Weston and Sampson as well. They run our I&I control plan project, which is mandatory now by our administrative order. So currently we have an I&I rehabilitation program, and then we're also under moratorium. But also with the lack of development, that hence this goes over to the ratepayers, and the ratepayers, it becomes obviously a burden to the ratepayers or the residents of Rockland at that point.
Sure. And why is the infrastructure capacity such a challenge for both plants?
Why the capacity is?
Yeah.
So again, like I brought up the fact of the I&I. So the sewer aspect also relates to stormwater as well. So the NIPTES permit was over at stormwater before, back in 2019, that converted over to the MS4. I don't mean to go off the sewer issue, but the two kind of relate.
Sure.
The stormwater, the MS4 permit, came into compliance back in 2019, 2020. So the issue is with the NIPTES, you're still dealing with illicit discharges at that point, whether it's stormwater or sewer related. The two work side by side, because if you're looking at the underground infrastructure, if your drainage is not working properly with your piping, your structures, your catch basins, your sewer is acting as a secondary drainage system at that point. So what we found out over the years is when we're doing roads, we do our stormwater and our drainage systems before we do a road project. When we do that, what we find out is that at the pump stations where we can monitor the flows of the sewer, those areas have dropped down. And Kristel's seeing it also, because what's happening is we're collecting that and we're holding it in the drainage system, and it's not actually getting to her aquifer.
We were just talking about this the other day, because the recharge in the reservoir is not, when I first started back in, I'm dating myself now, but in the early 2000s, I used to see the reservoir, I felt recharged a lot, bounced back from the season a lot faster, and we're not seeing that anymore, which tells me it's going to the plant instead of going into the reservoir where it belongs. So we were actually just talking about this the other day. It's kind of funny. Well, it's not, but it's frustrating. But it's stuff that Dave said, we need to focus on this area, because I have a feeling this is one of the places, that is, not as tight that it should be with I&I. And, I think he's onto something there, because it's right around where the reservoir is. So that's, not having the recharge in the reservoir becomes a supply issue for us, really, because we count on that big time.
Sure. Kristel, I have another question. Can you describe what's happening with the Rockland-Abington Joint Waterworks to improve water quality?
Sure. We're doing a lot of different things. So with what we do in our industry, water quality regulations are always changing. Technology is always improving. So there's always something that we can, do better. We're constantly trying to evaluate our process and the way we do things to do things in a better way, or see where we can, improve this in the treatment plant or that in the street. But more, trying to focus more on water quality leads me a little bit in the treatment direction. So, with regards to that, I can, point out a couple monumental things that we've done recently. We cleaned all of the treatment plant storage tanks. So we have ones that are actually at the plant underground, and then we have ones that are in the system. So you'll have in Rockland, Rice Avenue, the storage tanks. Those are above ground. We have some in Abington that we've cleaned. Those don't get cleaned every year, every day, anything like that. You just have to schedule them, and it becomes a big process. But what I've decided to do was, rather than be reactive, like, oh, the water quality coming out of the tank seems to be not so great. We know what's leaving the treatment plant is great, but leaving the tank is not so great. What I decided to do was get on more of a maintenance schedule. So we're going to be doing like investing in a long-term maintenance program with a contractor. And with that, we'll be evaluating, doing our annual rooftop inspections, and then our washouts that we have to do and undertake. We'll be doing some structural evaluations, metal thickness, cleaning, paint, security, things like that for the tanks. That'll be a huge undertaking, but it will be something that we really very much need to do. It'll help us save on funding, because if we do this big, approach the way that I want to do it, as far as not a reactive, but more of a proactive, we'll be able to plan it, and it will save a ton of funding. We're talking in the realm of $7 million when all is said and done, which is fantastic. So that's one, planned approach that we're going to take. We're doing, more plant cleanouts, which we're cleaning water. We take some nasty stuff out of the water. We refer to it as sludge. So that happens semi-annually. And once we do that every single time the plant is cleaned out, water quality always improves. You're taking the stuff that's stored in the bottom of the plant out. So, of course, it's going to improve. And then one thing that I'm extremely excited about is we landed a $50,000 grant from the EEA to monitor our hydrants. So we're going to put hydrant loggers throughout little spots in Rockland and in Abington. And it's going to help us detect water main breaks earlier, which is fantastic. It's going to help us cut back on unaccounted for water. So you'll have breaks or leaks from people's service lines that have a tendency to not surface. So we can't see them. We're losing water. We can't figure out. Maybe Dave's taking it. I'm not really sure. Sometimes we just can't figure out where the water is going. We know we're not filling the tanks fast enough. Something's just wrong. These hydrant loggers will be able to tell us, collect data. We'll be able to upload it, and it will tell us, hey, listen, something's off in this area. And we'll be able to go and investigate it faster, which will be great. It'll help cut back on lost water and lost revenue too. So that is great. And we were able to get a grant for that for $50,000, because the hydrant loggers we'll get 200 of them. So they're pretty expensive, along with the equipment that goes along with it, so that we can upload that data. We are also undertaking a huge project over at Great Sandy Bottom in Pembroke, which is the workhorse of the system for the treatment plants. We are renovating one of the filters over there, and that is a $600,000 to $700,000 project that I am able to do from our revenue. It's not tax dollars or anything like that. It's just coming straight from our savings account. And we're very much looking forward to that. It hasn't been done for decades, so very much looking forward to that. We are going to be approaching our favorite time of the year. I'm sure everybody is looking forward to flushing season. That is coming up. So we do that in the fall and the spring. So if we don't do that, you're going to end up with dirty water. So it just basically reverses the flow that it normally goes in. And, we use velocity and just, break off those nasty metal deposits on the inside of the mains. And the final thing that I do want to mention is we implemented a new water bank program and application. So when developers or even residents add a bedroom to their home, or a developer installs, puts in a huge development, I have a way of tracking what we were just talking about, how much water we have left in the system and at our sources. Before, I feel like it was a little, it was done a little prehistorically, I guess, if you want to use that word, and maybe just a little unrefined. Now I have a way of tracking exactly how much water we have left in our permit. And it's a good way to say, hey, we need to pump the brakes here and maybe approach a moratorium if things look a little shaky when we approach, or, hey, now it's time to look at another source of water. Things like that. So this application is a way to track it, see what's going on, keep track of developments, and make sure we're pulling in the fees we're supposed to be pulling in, things like that. And also the board implemented a one-year TAP program. So if you did, say, a development or you're going to put in a single-family home, you have a year to tap the system and use the water. You can't just say, okay, I need 1,000 gallons and sit there and not use it for 10 years and just take it off the books. The way that we look at things is that's taking 1,000 gallons from, say, Allison, who wants to put in a development herself, and that 1,000 gallons is now not, it's not available to her development. So normally this wouldn't be an issue, but since we're kind of down to the wire with what we have left, which is roughly 50,000 gallons on the permit, we do have to really, keep track of it and make sure that everybody has a fair, shake at what's left. So this makes sure that we don't overdraw on the permit, and that can actually, as the reservoirs draw down, it can actually really affect water quality in a way. So this is a way to promote responsible growth and water use as well.
Have there been any developments on the PFAS mitigation?
There sure has,
and
yeah.
What about funding? Has there been any funding secured?
Yes, there has. So with the PFAS, we, if everybody recalls, I can just go into a little bit of history about it. In 2019, we were actually trying to get a fourth well line over at Myers Ave in Abington. And we discovered that there was PFAS in that fourth well. And we took the well offline right away. This was before any of the PFAS regulations were implemented that we have right now. They were still at 70 parts per trillion. So when we found the PFAS in that well, we shut the treatment plant down and we dealt with it over in Abington. It was a ground treatment plant, so it's easier, of course, to retrofit a groundwater treatment plant. You just take the media out of one of the filters. We put the media that PFAS, it's GAC media, really. We put that in the fourth filter. We were able to put the plant back online. I'm making it sound easy, but it took us 10 months to do this, and boom, we were back online. So that was fantastic. But coming from that, it made us kind of realize, hey, maybe we should test our other sources. And in October of 2020, the Mass DEP published the drinking water PFAS standard. So in 2021, we began to proactively start testing for PFAS. And then we started consistently in March of 2021 testing at Hingham Street in Rockland over the limit. So then that's when we knew we had to do something about it in Rockland. So last night we had a meeting and, about some, new development coming. And we mentioned, we really were ahead of most other communities researching this and trying to take care of the PFAS. And with all said and done, if you go and look at the website that we have, we have a timeline of from start to finish. We're almost finished, of how this project has gone on. The website's arjww.org. But if you go on there, you can follow the whole timeline of what we've done. But we did secure a $26 million loan, 0% financing through the SRF program. And $13 million was voted at Town Hall in Rockland, town meeting in Rockland, and $13 million was voted at town meeting in Abington. So we were able to take up to that amount out for bond and fund the project. And I am really excited to announce that we have had the project online since May 4th of this year. We're still, testing, and we're not ready to make the full announcement just yet, but we are flowing water through the project right now, and we're really excited about it.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And how do these improvements impact ratepayers, and what financial pressures does the water system face?
So we did have to go up on rates a while ago. I'm not entirely sure right now off the top of my head what year we went up, but knowing that this was coming, knowing that we had to pay back this loan ourselves, because we're not funded by the taxes that come into Rockland. We're funded by water bills. So when you pay your water bill, that's what helps me pay, do payroll. It helps me, buy chemicals at the treatment plants and keep the vehicles moving. And we pay back this loan with the rates. So unfortunately, we did have to go up on the water rates to $8 per 100 cubic feet. But so far, we haven't had to do anything at that point yet. So further, I should say. So so far, so good. I think we should be able to be okay with the loan at this point for the PFAS.
Very good. Dave, I have a couple of questions for you. Can you explain the town's inflow and infiltration redemption plan, and why is it so important?
Okay. Well, I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. So we do have Weston and Sampson. They're our engineering company that oversees the I&I control plan. We, by doing that with some of the smaller developments that have gone through, or houses, or adding a bedroom, there is an I&I infiltration fee that the people have to pay, the residents or the developer. That helps us pay for I&I remediation or rehab. What it does is, part of our administrative order, we have to do an 11-to-1 ratio. So if we have to charge to that, and we have to come up with a rehab price. The current rehab price is $6.83 a gallon. So we multiply that, and that's essentially the fee. And then some of the rehab is less than that. Some of the rehab is more than that. That happens to be about the average. So if somebody was coming in and say they had a 3-bedroom, it's 110 gallons a bedroom. That's 330 gallons. Water uses the same ratio when they're figuring out fees. And then so if it's 330 gallons, it's essentially 11 times that. So, and then after you do the rehab, depending on if it's an inflow rehab, like I said, you get 100% of the inflow rehab, or you get roughly 50 to 60% of infiltration. So not to get off kilter, but so once you get that done, that shows the EPA and the regulatory bodies that we've got more capacity by allowing that development. But right now, we're only doing it on a small scale. The previous board that was there allowed a small scale of that coming in, which allotted us a little bit of revenue, even if it's a bedroom. We're looking at it differently now, because now we're dealing with ADU issues coming on. So as a board and as a sewer department, we have to look at that moving forward and how we're going to handle that. Do we consider it new development? Do we consider it added? It's not like you're adding an in-law apartment on. These ADUs can be completely separate than the current dwelling. So to look at that, we have to look at the inflow and infiltration, how the tie-ins are going to be, how they are, and then how we can mandate certain compliancy issues. We are restricted with the moratorium, so obviously dealing with that, there's not a lot of money. So the only monies for that inflow and infiltration is coming from past development, or what we would have currently and what we're going to have in the future. So
Sure. And what does it mean to be working under an EPA administration or administrative order? And how does it affect town processing?
So the administrative order, like I made mention to, we had an administrative order back in 2006. There was a partial moratorium back then. They worked through it. There was that's when the I&I rehabilitation started. We ended up having another administrative order issued to us back in 2020. So that was when we went to full moratorium at that point. And then that was when it was mandated that we needed to get an I&I control plan. That's when we hired Weston and Sampson to essentially run that on the engineering aspects. We since then have done multiple rehabilitation projects to recoup some of that we identified with the original. We are currently going out to bid right now for another portion of that rehabilitation. So to try to get ahead proactively, so at some point, what Kristel made mention to is she's doing a water bank. What we would like to do at some point is come up with a sewer bank where we could allow a small amount of development. And once we get the I&I recouped, we're allowing more capacity with each smaller project. So at some point, we can approach the regulatory bodies, maybe we can allow a larger development. And then that would pay. So say if we had a larger development and it was, 5,000 gallons a day, times 11, that would what they'd have to recoup times essentially $7. That's a large amount of money coming in that would pay for a lot of that sewer I&I remediation. So obviously we don't have that right now. So that burden it is a burden, and that goes over to our ratepayers, which are our taxpayers, which are, our residents. So that is a burden, financial burden, to say the least.
And how do sewer system needs translate to financial pressures for residents?
Yeah, so the same aspect. So you're passing without the fees, without the development, that we're all talking about. Those burdens go over to the ratepayer or the taxpayer or the resident. So, what we try to do with those rates is we try to incorporate that into. So back in 2020, we had a rate study done the first time I was down there. So we had a rate study done by Weston and Sampson. That came up with a certain rate that we need to be for the next 10 to 15 years. And that rate, by using the rate study, that comes up with what we need to do for I&I, what we need to do at the plant, what we need to do for infrastructure upgrades. It incorporates everything. It incorporates where we need to be. It's essentially a financial map, for the sewer and also for the town to see what we need to do to have come in financially for the monies to cover all those aspects. So we just are redoing another bid for the rate study to redo the rate study, because right now, if you go back 3 years ago, we were finally in a good financial area with the sewer where we started getting more retained earnings, which we didn't have up till probably 3 years ago. So we have all those retained earnings. We're an enterprise fund, which Kristel alluded to. You're essentially working off of receipts, not taxes. So whatever you have for receipts, and then you figure in your expenditures, and then at the end of the day, end of the year, you come up with your retained earnings. That goes over to the state. They send you that back as a certified report, where we're an enterprise fund. So a few years ago, we also accepted as a board and as a town a stabilization. So we were able to, for the first time, moving into this next town meeting, to put in $1 million into our stabilization. So essentially comes out of account, goes into another account, and actually accrues interest at this point, which is also figured into our rate study. So now that's another aspect that has to be figured into everything else. Now we have retained earnings. And we also have the wastewater treatment plant phase 1 upgrade, which is $35 million. So we are on the IUP for the Clean Water Trust through the DEP. That was, it's a hard area to be. So they actually have us on that for the full amount of $32.5 million. So, and then we have the backup funds for the bonds, which was $1.5 million 3 years ago, $12.5 million 2 years ago, and $22 million a year ago. So the town voted on those funds at town meeting for $35 million. So, and that's the treatment plant. And then exactly what Kristel said, we also have smaller capital projects, which we started a couple years ago at the plant to try to get more capacity at the plant, to treat that I&I, to have more holding capacity, all the piping, the ball valves, maybe the grit chamber, the water skid, all that has to be figured into that rate study as well, because while we're doing the phase 1 wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we have all this other failing infrastructure that we need to keep up with. So again, that's another aspect figured into the rate study, which eventually on the rates. So we had to go up on the rates again this year to cover a $400,000 shortfall. And we're hoping with this rate study, we can get the next 10 years mapped out for us and have that, and we're able to stick to that rate study. So obviously, like, I don't mean to sound like the soothsayer of doom, but obviously that falls over to the ratepayers to pay for all that. So there's a lot of aspects that are figured into. That's why we're going back out for another rate study. So to get the next 10-year plan. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And I have a couple of questions here. I want to invite everybody to share their response if you would like to. What long-term solutions is the town exploring to address the infrastructure capacity?
So I can start. It starts with the open space and recreation plan and the housing production plan. We need to know where we can build more houses to bring more folks in here, and also look at our infrastructure, as Kristel and Dave mentioned. We have to expand that. We have to look for opportunities, whether it's through reducing I&I, looking for additional water, or, as Kristel mentioned, fixing I&I. So hopefully we have our reservoirs filled back up. We can't really develop without those things. We can't lower taxes without increased, improved land. And that's really the goal, is we need to support opportunities to expand water, expand sewer capacity, and look at ways to promote development where it makes sense.
Sure.
And to Steve's point, to piggyback on the idea of the housing production plan and the open space and rec plan playing critical roles in the space, we were supported in a Community One Stop for Growth grant that we are only able to get because we have MBTA zoning in place, to look at a secondary effluent discharge facility up in North Rockland that would, allow additional capacity because it would be a secondary treatment facility. Another opportunity that was brought forward last night at a meeting in Abington was the possibility of exploring a new way to introduce additional water capacity through our existing infrastructure. I'm not a water expert nor a sewer expert, so I cannot share details about how those would happen, but they do present an opportunity to at least explore and the feasibility of expanding the capacity that we have so that we can absorb the growth that we need to lessen the burden on the Rockland residents and the ratepayers and the taxpayers.
Sure. Do you guys want to add anything?
I just think, to Dave's point, you're hearing him list all of these things that could go wrong. And it's the same thing in my department. It's just a constant something's breaking, and it's normal. There's nothing wrong that's happening. It's just constantly something could go wrong. You have all these machines doing all these things, and and then you have computers and just everything. There's so many places that can go wrong, especially when you have 3 different treatment plants, a booster station, and I don't know how many things you have going on, but you have a treatment plant and how many
11
stations.
pump stations and 2 injectors. Yeah.
There's so many moving parts. You see these TV programs, the reality ones like Gold Rush, there's something always breaking, and that's literally our reality. And then you're trying to, manage these huge, programs that are going on, or, he's up against the ACO, or, do they call it an ACO, or is it just an AO? I don't.
AO.
If you don't have the development coming in that you can try to manage these things, that's where we get our funding. It's kind of like this double-edged sword where he's in a moratorium. You can't bring, development in, but that's where you get your funding to correct these problems. It's just a constant battle. So we definitely need to come up with some sort of a solution, especially for water, for a source, which we're kind of moving in the right direction, I feel. And I feel like you're moving in the right direction too. We're all in baby steps right now. We're just trying to do the right thing, and make educated decisions that will benefit everyone.
Kristel, I want to add, you mentioned the things that potentially could go wrong in these facilities, all the machinery that's impacted. I want to bring it down to maybe something that most folks can understand, because that can sound scary.
It can, yeah.
Think of, you have a car, and as you own it over time, certain pieces of that car are going to need repair. We are not in a position where after, maybe you own a car for 10 years and you say, okay, now it's time for a new one. We do not have the luxury to go out and buy a new water treatment plant, to buy a new sewer treatment plant from the lot. we have to continue to fix and maintain these plants like we would our vehicles. And so if you ever owned an old car, you know, as time goes on, you're fixing many different pieces of that car. And so, yeah, it is normal, right? Over time, we have to fix these things. But those do allow us opportunities to make improvements along the way, like we're doing with the PFAS.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I also, hope to get at town meeting like a master plan update, which is something that we have coming, hopefully. And that'll just prioritize projects, kind of like you're speaking about. And it'll allow us to, plan for the future and be proactive. And that's really where I would like to take the department, being more proactive. I mean, we have to be reactive with some things, with water main breaks and things like that. I don't talk about that out loud very much. But, you got to try to be more proactive and address things before they happen so you can plan for things. You need to have items and inventory on the shelf. So we did an asset management grant, and we have, a list of equipment and parts, and where do we need to focus and make sure we have supply. It's really big to try to plan. That's a huge aspect of the job in the water department and what we try to do. I mean, there's always going to be an emergency that comes around the corner here or there, but it's how you react to it and how it's handled. And the staff that I have that works for the water department is fantastic. So, I mean, I feel supported. I'm sure you feel the same way. It's just all of these moving parts. It's just how you handle it, being prepared, and working together to get the job done so that you can get things back online. That's the most important part of the job, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
One thing, so I know what Kristel just touched on. So we're doing the same thing proactively. So we have a capital plan for the next 5 years, and that doesn't include the phase one wastewater treatment plant for $35 million. What we've done is we've broken it down into a priority list of. So we have 2 priority lists, one at the plant and one out in the field. So we have, 11 pump stations. So what we're doing is we're completely rehabbing 1.5 pump stations a year. It's significant. That's everything. That's mechanicals. That's the wet wells. That's all the treatment, the pumps, everything. Whether it be the roof, the siding, the paint inside, completely rehabbing it. So while we're doing the phase one upgrade or phase 2 in the upcoming years, our pump stations aren't completely dropping off, and we're coming back to the pump stations. Hey, we need 11 pump stations redone. We're continually adding that to our capital plan, like secondary capital plan, that we do in-house. So we're doing the same thing, whether it's, expanding more, pipes, like we have a grit chamber project, like we have to deal with how we deal with the sediment or the grit after it's processed, how we're doing that. And we're trying to make it, more affordable for us as a town and trying to come up with different areas. Like you made mention to the $800,000 grant for the other, the discharge area. We're talking with water on how we could, if we could happen to get that grant, which is in the feasibility stage right now, but if that's happened where it is actually something that could come to fruition, that takes 300 to 350,000 gallons offline that's coming to our plant on the opposite side of the town, which as it gets closer to the plant, it's picking up more I&I infiltration on high. So by the time it gets to the plant, it could be 500, 600,000 gallons that we're treating from that area. So if you're reverting that at another discharge area on that side of town, you're actually going to add more capacity over there. And if you look at a ground discharge, which is the only thing they allow right now by our regulatory bodies, if we somehow can incorporate that ground discharge closer to the town's aquifer, you also have a discharge and you also have a recharge. So that's where you see a little proactive and a collaboration between like town hall and other departments. So we're already talking about. So we're all like looking at different ways where we can kind of help each other and where we can, we can get that growth and how we're paying for it.
Right.
So I just wanted to make mention because that was a huge grant to get.
And that's a huge job that you're doing, 1.5 pump stations, like that's huge.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that's also figured into, again, the rate study and, the expenditures and how we're taking in our retained earnings. So, and that's fairly new. That's all like within 4 years. So the retained, what we've got. So we're moving in the right direction. And that's obviously by help of, all the departments have something to do with that, and especially the ratepayer themselves, because they're paying for it. So,
Sure. I would really like to hear about the MVP grant and how it supports the climate resilient planning.
Sure. So the MVP, which is Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness, is a grant that we're working on with the town of Abington jointly. Also, Weston and Sampson is kind of the lead on that. Similar planning study as the ones we've already been talking about. This is really to engage residents on how they're experiencing climate-related emergencies. Think of like our recent storm that we had, or like, the 500 feet of snow that we all just had. We're doing a lot of community outreach, especially with like vulnerable populations. The elderly, you often don't have access to, they can't get out of the car. They don't know if they need to get to the hospital, the doctor, that kind of thing, to evaluate culverts, to look at, our wetlands. All of that will help us inform, again, long and short-term goals for how we experience and plan for climate-related emergencies.
Sure. And I also want to know what the purpose of the comprehensive facility plan and the role of the OPM is.
so the OPM is DPC. So what it is, the role is essentially acting as a mediator or a project manager, overseeing, because one, as far as staffing at the sewer department, it's myself right now, the sewer superintendent, or interim at this point, and then we have administrative staff. So there's no collection staff, there's no secondary staff. All of the rest of the facility, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or out on the collections, is either subbed out for rehab projects or is under Veolia's scope. So the OPM, as far as the phase one wastewater treatment plant, obviously they're professional engineers that actually have designed treatment plants. The design is being done by Wright Pierce. So Wright Pierce, we're at the 60% design phase where we're at the comment section. So in a few weeks, we'll be giving comments back. So I'm not going to pretend I know how to build a wastewater treatment plant. So, I mean, my whole family are engineers, but I'm the black sheep with no engineering background. So, so you have to have an OPM to oversee that. So we're not missing anything small. So that burden isn't onto the town. That burden runs onto the project manager, essentially. So, and they're overseeing, and they, to be honest, they weren't my first choice, and you know what I mean, because I'm used to dealing with the big dogs out there, but I'm more than happy working with DPC. They've been great. They're very proactive. They sound off when we need somebody to sound off with our designer. So I think the collaboration between Wright Pierce, the designer, DPC, our engineer, OPM, and then we also have Weston and Sampson that's doing our NIX. So there's a huge collaboration there. And then we deal with some smaller outside wetland, smaller engineers that help us out with some of the NIPD's permit or the stormwater that are related to the sewer. So there's a lot going on. So we're very grateful that we do have a good OPM on board right now. So
Sure. And how might the Housing Works grant help evaluate the secondary effluent discharge facility?
As far as the grant over on the north side of town?
Sure, yeah.
Again, that would take off 300 to 350,000 gallons of the wastewater, the processing that would come to the plant. But then that doesn't include what that would pick up. So you're literally on the opposite side of town. All that's coming over. That's also passing through 1, 2, 3. You have Old Country Way Pump Station, Lincoln Road Pump Station, Hingham North Pump Station, and Hingham South. So that's a burden also on the pump stations before it even gets to our plant at that point. So if you got that grant and we're in the feasibility stage, like I made mention to, and it comes to fruition, that would take a huge burden off of what's being processed at all 4 pump stations and also at the plant. And it also would open up, depending on what size discharge or treatment area is there. If it was designed for 750,000 gallons or 1 million, that also allows for development over in that area, which could be paid for by development and not the ratepayers or the taxpayers at this point. And then we also made mention it could be a recharge. So if somehow all that infrastructure is recharging and that could end over to recharge the aquifer, that also is a commodity that you can't reproduce. Like sewer and water are different in the aspects where we can get more capacity because it's just going to cost money. But water is one of those commodities. If it's not raining, if it's not snowing, you can't come up with extra water unless it's from a complete other source. So I wouldn't even I'm not even going to pretend I know how to would even deal with that. So so that essentially would take a huge burden off of obviously everybody involved. So if that comes to fruition at this point.
I have one final question. What opportunities exist to expand water capacity through regional partnerships?
I think that, there's a lot of collaboration. I think the idea of looking at these bigger infrastructure problems through a regional lens is beneficial to all parties. We're not going to be making more water, right? That is like a worldwide problem. That having been said, on a very localized level, it's also unlikely that the state or the federal government is going to fund each independent municipality brand new infrastructure. They just don't have it, and the local municipalities don't have it either. So the only way to expand upon capacity and quality within that new capacity is to look at it regionally. That's my understanding of the problem.
Sure. Kristel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
So, you're talking about bringing MWRA down. That, is a big topic in our area. There are multiple groups talking about it. How can we get the pipeline down here? It's a lot of money to work that whole situation through, but I think there's a lot of conversations happening, which are great. Perhaps it won't be as much money as we think. I can't really speak to that, but that definitely can be a solution. There's other conversations like, David said, you just can't find water. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't snow, we don't have water. So then you have to go out and you have to, talk to other communities and see where you can get water from. So, we will begin soon having conversations with other communities to see where we can capitalize on that topic.
Sure.
So.
And while we have the residents of Rockland tuned in, is there anything that you would like to tell them as like a closing statement? Sort of, Kristel, I can start with you.
As with regards to PFAS, I would just keep your eyes and ears open for a nice announcement coming up soon. But the treatment plant has been on, and we have been flowing water for since the beginning of March. But we're just kind of holding back the full announcement until we're ready, until we have clearance to do so. But we're very much right on schedule for what we thought we would be with the project. So we're very excited about that. And we are looking for other sources of water in the water department. So both internally and with what we have now. So exploring at Myers Ave at our well field, and then talking to other communities, like I just mentioned, seeing what we can do there. So we can encourage responsible development in Abington and Rockland.
Sure. Dave.
Well, I'll just make a note on Kristel's, because I go down to the water plant here and there on Hingham Street, and if you drive in there now compared to 5-10 years ago, like there's a lot going on. Like it's pretty incredible to go in there and see. Like it was probably 6 months, and then I showed up to deal with Tommy, on some other issues down there on how we can help each other out. And then all of a sudden there's a brand new building up, and I'm like, what's that? What is that? And then he explained the whole thing. So to see everything that's actually getting done down there, it's like, that's a big positive note for what she's done and what her team has done down there, because that wasn't done just until recently. So it's fascinating to see that process compared to the process that I'm dealing with. But then some of the things are so related,
It is.
on the processing. We're all dealing with PFAS, even on the sewer side. So But we can chemically enhance it because, it has to be before it heads out into French's Stream. But I mean, I'm obviously a town resident, so, when I look at it, trying to be fiscally responsible as a town resident, I don't want to pay any more taxes. I don't want to pay any higher rates. But you have to show people what you're actually doing with those, by raising those, And I think we're doing it, we're doing our due diligence, looking at absolutely every aspect and how we can make it better and how we can take the burden off of the residents and the ratepayers and the taxpayers. So, I just think they should know we're proactively looking at, like I made mention to, all those capital projects. We're doing another rate study. So we're doing everything we possibly can to make it better, So I think people should know that. And then everybody involved with it, and that we're all looking at it the same way. So,
Well said.
yeah.
Allyson.
Sure. I would like to thank, my colleagues and Steve for joining and helping kind of walk through this today. I'm not an infrastructure expert, but I've learned a lot about it in the last few years because I have colleagues that are willing to share their knowledge and brainstorm ways to, collaborate and figure, how we can improve infrastructure, complete housing production plans and open space and rec plans, identify areas where we can have modest redevelopment and alleviate some of the burdens that Rockland residents are experiencing. I'd also love to ask that Rockland residents get involved in the open space and housing production plans. We have information online on ways that they can connect and participate. And just happy to be here and participate.
And Steve.
Sure. I want to piggyback on something Dave said about where our taxes are going. We have to invest in our infrastructure in order to facilitate smart development, which will ultimately help with the tax burden we all face. We have to look at it as an investment for the future. I also want to close by thanking Seth and the WRPS crew for their time today. The efforts allowed us to highlight recent accomplishments and plans for the future of Rockland. I'd also like to thank our Town Planner Allyson Quinn, our Interim Sewer Superintendent Dave Taylor, our Abington Rockland Joint Waterworks Superintendent Kristel Cameron for their time today and their efforts on a daily basis, making Rockland a great place to live. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Assistant Town Administrator Courtney Bjorgard for her help putting this together. She is the conduit for most interdepartmental cooperation at Town Hall and a big reason why we see efforts like these come together. Today's question and answer session really highlights the cooperation and collaboration that our department heads use on a daily basis to continue to move Rockland forward. As we think about the future, I want to encourage all viewers to fill out the MAPC survey at https://mapc.ma/rooted-in-Rockland-outreach or scan the QR code that's been on the screen today. The survey and any follow-up interviews will guide the development of both the housing production plan and open space and recreation plan. I would also like to encourage Rockland voters to consider getting involved with the local boards and committees. There are always vacancies that need to be filled. If you're not sure but interested in a particular board or committee, you can attend any of these open meetings and listen in. I think you'll find if you're interested enough in the subject matter, you'll have what it takes to meaningfully contribute to the future of the town of Rockland. You can find a list of board and committee vacancies on our town website at https://rockland-ma.gov. Success is inevitable when all parties come together to travel a shared path with a common goal of moving Rockland forward.
This has been In Studio. I would like to thank all of my guests for appearing today with me. Have a good night.